Welcome to the presentations of Chapter 1 about the world economy, about winners and losers. In this first paragraph, we're going to look at the balance of economic power. Is it shifting? Which regions become more important in the world economy? And the way that we're going to look at this is due to the following objectives. We are going to look at the BRIC countries. What countries are these and why are they called the BRIC countries? We are going to look at multinationals, multinational organizations, how do they affect the moving production facilities to low-income countries. We're going to look at the production chain, what is that and why is it divided across the world. What is a trade war and why did it happen? What is global shift and what is the relation to globalization? And of course, what is multipolarity in world economics? But first we have to look at something that started about 35 to 40 years ago. The BRICS countries. What are they? Well, these countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa, were countries which did grow pretty fast economically. And these countries had an economic growth which made them more important in the world economy. They were becoming a part of economic growth. But of course, due to something that happened between Russia and Ukraine, Russia is not one of these countries anymore because it does not grow anymore because of the fact that it is not allowed to trade with a lot of countries because of the war in Ukraine. The last 30 to 40 years, these countries did grow quite fast and they became of importance to the world economy. For example, Brazil was working with Italy for the past 50 years in car manufacturing, and Brazil was trading with Europe and the United States for a long time, and because of that trade, the country became one of the most important countries in Southern America when you're looking at the economic process, about the economic growth. And what happened was that the third sector, the diensten sector in Dutch, became much more important than the other sectors. So although Brazil is still a semi-periphery country, they are in development, that is true, they got this big tertiary sector which became of course important because of the fact that people in Brazil gained money, they became richer because of the trade with Europe and the United States. And of course BRIC is an acronym which stands for the countries that belong to it. Well, some months ago there were new countries added to these BRIC countries list, and that means that there are new countries, of course, which are growing economically nowadays. So of course the countries which belong to the old BRIC countries will eventually become central countries, Centrumlanden, and then there will be new countries which will be important to the economic growth and the economic power of the world. And now we have to look at multinational organizations and the shift to low-income countries. Multinational organizations are of course organizations which do have production facilities or offices in several countries. And what happened was that the richest countries in the world, like in Europe or in the United States, tried to find a way where they could produce their products cheaper. And of course, because of the fact that prices are lower in several countries in the East and Asia, these companies decided to move their production facilities to abroad. And if you're looking at these multinational organizations, you have to look at like organizations which produce clothing. Of course, the clothing is designed in the US or in Europe, but it is produced in Bangladesh or in India or in other countries. And these processes show that we are, as rich countries, are moving our production to countries which have lower income regions. Why do we do that? Well, because the margins are getting bigger, higher. We can earn money by producing it cheaper in the East, but on the other hand, we can stimulate the economy in these countries as well, because the people have work to do there. Well, if you look at these countries, most of the labor and economic growth takes place in the industrial sector. And if you look at the Brazil GDP, the breakdown per sector, I already said this in the other slide, you will notice that services is the biggest part of that's the tertiary sector, the biggest part of the economy of Brazil. If you should swap this picture for a picture from Bangladesh, you might notice that the industrial sector, the secondary sector, is bigger. And of course, there are many countries in Africa, for example, or in Asia, in countries which were not that developed yet, that the agricultural sector, the primary sector, is bigger. But in this case, when you're looking at the production of clothing, like on the pictures visible, this takes place in the orange sector, in the industrial sector, or the secondary sector. And when you're looking at the development of products, you have to see that you'll notice that the production of certain products is divided across the globe. So that means that we are looking at the divided production chain. And what does that mean? Well, it is a chain in the process from natural resource to the end product, which we buy in a store. But what happens? Well, if you look at the production of a certain product, you might notice that the source is in a different country than the place where the store itself is. And in between, there are several steps which have to be taken to create the end product. So that means that there are different steps to be made. And this is what we call the spatial shift in the production process. If you look at the picture on the bottom right, you see that in the production chain of cocoa, there is movement visible across the globe. You see that there's a cocoa farm, and the cocoa beans are being created on a field, and they of course are traded, and they are sold to a processor which processes the cocoa in powder, in butter, which can be sold again to the food industry. And there the final product is being made, and the end product, the bar of chocolate, can be bought at a retailer, and that is where we buy it. So it's possible that the cocoa comes from Brazil and that it is being processed somewhere in Europe or in Asia, and again it's been transported to Europe and the United States or other countries, because chocolate is being eaten everywhere across the globe, and then at a retailer we can buy it. So that means that a multinational organization does have production plans all around the globe to produce a product that we buy over here, or which we buy when we are on a holiday, because it is the same product, but it is made in different countries because of the fact that the sources, and sources can be labor as well, are to be found in different countries around the world. So a source can be everywhere and a production plant can be anywhere, but it is so that they do that because of the costs, of course. But sometimes countries do not want to work together, and in this case a trade war could emerge, because a country can take measures to protect itself from foreign markets, and that is what happened a few years ago when Donald Trump was president of the United States. He decided that they wanted to add tax to products that were important from China. And China, of course, did not like that, so they decided to ban American products. So a trade war did emerge. Of course, it led to some problems in the United States because many shops in the United States had to buy their products from other facilities because they weren't allowed to buy them in China anymore, or they were just too expensive. And the result was that the prices of products in the US rised very fast, so life was getting expensive. And of course, the inhabitants, the population of the United States did not like that. And of course, it caused discussions between countries. When we're talking about geopolitics, it's a power game. Which country is the most powerful? And of course, China and the US are actually having a game with that. Which of the two countries is the most powerful at this moment? Of course, now Joe Biden is president of the US, and as you might notice on the picture, the relationship between the countries is getting better because of the fact that they started to work together again. Then we're going to look at globalization. What is globalization? Well, it is the process in which multinationals have stores or offices in many countries around the world, which I told you before. But McDonald's is a form of globalization as well, because when we are on a holiday in Egypt, we can buy the same products as we can buy when we are in America or when we are here in the Netherlands. But what countries are the most influential on the rest of the world when you look at multinationals? Well, if you look at this picture, you might notice that there are many big multinationals which are, of course, European or American. And of course, they say that Americanization is a big problem, but it's the globalization in total. And it is not a problem, because those multinationals can deliver quality products everywhere around the globe. Of course, not everyone is allowed or can buy the product because of rules in the country or because they don't have enough money for it, but they are influential as well on the production of goods, because other goods or other production facilities are using the American sources to create their own products. So you can see that there's a worldwide working together between corporations. And in the past, of course, the trade was the most important: Japan, the European Union, the US. And now, due to a global shift, the international market changes. It's not anymore between the powerful states of the European Union and the United States, but it is moved from the United States to Asia. So that means that due to global shift, Europe is becoming less interesting to invest in. And if you look at the picture, which I'll show you bigger on the next slide, you might notice that the trade is going to move from the Atlantic rim, so around the Atlantic Ocean, to the Pacific rim. You can see that on this picture. Originally, there was an important trade route between Europe and the United States. Of course, Europe did trade with Asia as well, and that still exists, but everything moved through the port of Rotterdam. Nowadays, you see that there are bigger ports in Asia which are more important than Rotterdam, so the United States decided to work together with Asia directly, and they did not work with the European Union anymore. So that means that the importance of Europe is, well, actually over. So that means that when you're talking about the global shift, there's a movement of the core trade between Europe, United States, to United States and Asia. But that is not everything that is happening. if there were only relationships between Asia and, for example, the United States, you call it a bipolar world economy. There are two locations which are important, but that is not happening. If you look at this map, you might notice that there are spots everywhere on this map which are or are becoming more important. So the old system changes. It's not only the central London which are important, but many other countries in the world, in other regions, on other continents, have influence on the world economy. And there we are back at the beginning. The BRIC countries show that there are many countries which are involved in the world economy, and this keeps on changing because countries change. And I think that Africa will become more important at the end of this century because they are still developing. So there will be a movement, and there's nothing wrong with that. It shows that all the countries are important to keep our planet, well, alive, you should say. So that was what I would like to tell you today. This what I wanted to show you, and I hope that you do have an image of what is happening when you're talking about economy and economics around our world. And that is everything for this paragraph.